What's up, Tribe 2.0? We are back to review or to talk about chapters 7, 8, and 9. And please don't forget to join us at 5 o'clock today. Today is February the 8th. Ooh, yeah, February the 8th. At 5 o'clock, we're going to be having a live discussion. So that's only in a few minutes. So if you're watching this right now, it might already be 5 o'clock. Just click on the link, join us, and you can come back to this later. I'm just saying. I didn't mean to put this out so late, but, life is what it is sometimes. So chapter 7, um, we find Galen and Hester. He was like, "Listen, I need to get out of here. Can we go for a walk? I just, these walls are closing in on me. I just need some fresh air." And she's like, "Fine." And so she takes him to an area that she thinks is pretty safe, that they won't be seen, or they won't, it won't, people won't see them or what have you. And they're going through the bluffs, and they're up on a mountain looking over, and they see this house. And he says, "That's a pretty big house. What's that house doing there? Because it's brand new and it's a really big house, so it probably sticks out from the regular landscape." And she said, "Oh, that's Lovejoy's Folly." And he was like, "Lovejoy's Folly?" She said, "Yeah, William Lovejoy. It's a pretty big, big wig. And remember, Lovejoy is the one who was also on the one of the conductors who doesn't think women should be conductors on the Underground Railroad." And she said, he built that house for his daughter and her new husband. And he said, "Oh, well, that's a beautiful home. And she said, "Yeah, but it's empty because daughter ran away the night before the wedding because she had fallen in love with the sheriff's son. Sheriff's son was white, she's black. That love was never meant to be, but she could not stomach the thought of marrying someone she did not love." And so they went on to so they went on for their walk or what have you, but he definitely had his eye on the house, right? So then he mentioned the fact that he had a fiance. Then he made mention about having a first love, but he doesn't really get into the story. He sort of acts like he's getting ready to tell her what happened between his first love. I think her name was Yvette. I usually underline names so I can find them pretty fast, but I did not underline her name. But I think her name was Yvette, and or Jeanette. Maybe it was Jeanette. Anyway, child, but he didn't finish the story, right? He just sort of let it fall. Then she tells him more about her fiance, and he says, "Well, is it a love match?" And she's like, "No." And he was like, "Well, what do you mean no?" She said, "Listen, love around me has always been a negative thing. Look at what my father did for love. He gave up his freedom to put himself in bondage. My aunt was in love with the Reverend, and out of respect to his wife, he never, for 30 years, he never allowed himself to open up and to, his love for my wife, for my aunt." So she said, "For me, love has always been, it's never been a positive thing. So for me, it's just more about companionship." Foster, who we find out he's the local teacher. He's in Oxford right now, getting another degree, or getting a degree. And she said, "We have a lot in common. We enjoy the same things. We like going to lectures. We can debate the topics of the day. And we just kind of get along for each other, that's it, that's just, and so he was like, "That's sad." Like, you should want to love, you should want to marry for love. Like, that's sad. And so he tells her, he said, "You're a little too serious. You're a little too serious." He said, "Have you ever made mud pies?" And she was like, "Why would I want to make mud pies?" And because she was talking about her in her childhood, how her aunt was like, "You need to get your studies," because remember, by the time she got to her aunt, she was already like 9 or 10 years old. She didn't know how to read, she didn't know how to write. And so she said, "My aunt just made sure that I got the basics, that I learned how to do all of these things, to read and to write and all this other stuff." And so he convinces her to go down the river. I mean, he picks her up and damn near carries her. Um, and they end up spending the day in the river playing in the mud, and she has a good time, and everything is great. Um, and Hester actually starts thinking about, what would it be like to kiss him? So we see her starting to think about him romantically, and he's thinking about her romantically. And because he said something about "stop looking at me like that." She said, "Looking at you like what?" He was like "You want to be kissed." And at the same time, she was thinking, what would it be like to kiss him? So they get back to the house and they get their water together. Now remember, he has a tub upstairs in the room where he's staying. So he goes upstairs to take his bath, and she has a tub in her room too. But she said, practicality, and she lives alone. She always just takes her bath in the kitchen where it's warmer, and she don't have to go up the steps and take the water up the steps. So she turned the lights down really low, so it's more like a silhouette. Like the silhouette challenge silhouette. And he she's taking her bath, and then when she's getting ready to get out of the bath, he comes in the kitchen. And she was like, well, what? So it's one of those moments where she carries up and grabs her towel, but of course not before he sees her, in her silhouette as much as he could see in the dark. Or it wasn't totally dark, but it was very, very dim. And, of course they had that whole awkward moment. So then she puts her nightgown on, and she's like, you could turn around now. And he turns around, and she is dressed in the ugliest nightgown that he has ever seen in his life. And he starts laughing at her. And it actually hurts her feelings. Like, she actually has tears in her eyes. But she was like, I will not let a tear fall. I'm going to tell you what I won't do. A tear won't fall out my eyes. But she's hurt. And so he sees that she's hurt, and he apologizes. He said, listen, sometimes, I grew up around people who could be vicious and they could give as good as they got. And so I apologize that sometimes my tongue gets the best of me. Because I think he even told her that's the ugliest thing he's ever seen, And he said, sometimes, my tongue gets the best of me. He said, but I promise you, I will never hurt you again. That's not my intention. And then he kisses her. And he kisses her, and she responds. She enjoys it. And then he says, you know what? We're going to end this right here before I do something that I don't need to do. And she was like what? So, baby, he kisses her again, and then he gets into playing with the breasts and stuff like that. Honey, I ain't gonna get too graphic, but y'all know, y'all read the book, y'all read it, y'all know. But he stops himself there, and he's like, listen, because if we keep going, it's gonna be a problem, and I don't want to, I don't want to compromise you. And so they end up going to bed, but later on that night, he has to wake her up because that message that he sent was a coded message for them to come and rescue him, and they have arrived, and we meet Raymond Levesque. Now, here's a spoiler. There's a sequel to Indigo, and it's Raymond Levesque's story. And it actually ends up being him and the rest of his family. These stories become connected, right? And so we meet Raymond Levesque, and he introduces, he says, listen, I gotta go, and Raymond's like, let's go, we gotta hurry up, we gotta get out of here, And he says, look, I have to go, but I wanted to say goodbye, and he said, listen, I'll be back, but I need you to promise something. When you see me, you'll pretend like you don't know me. And she was like, okay, well, what's that about? He was like, I'm just pretend like you don't know me. And so she was like, okay, that's fine. So it's 4 months later. So that was the end of chapter 7. So we're in chapter 8. So it's 4 months later. Winter is turning into spring in Michigan, and they find out that there has been someone has bought Lovejoy's Folly, right? It's this mysterious buyer. Nobody really knows a lot about them, but they have bought Lovejoy's Folly. Also, during this time, Hester finds herself in dire straits financially. The money that she was waiting on, it finally came, but it wasn't as much as she thought it was going to be, and she's really, really in trouble. And so she has to make the decision to try to sell some land. And so William Lovejoy lets her know, said, listen, the buyer who bought my house is actually looking to buy some of the land around the house, and since the house borders your property, I can give you his information and his agent's information, and you let me know. And so his agent shows up to meet with Hester, and it's Arnold Renault. And again, you'll read more about him in other books as we continue on, if you decide to continue on in the Beverly Jenkins world, which I highly recommend. But he comes through with an offer that is 3 times the amount of is worth 3 times the amount of what the land is worth. And Hester was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not taking this much money. Like, that's I wouldn't do that. Like, what the land is worth is more than enough for what I need. I certainly don't need 3 times the amount. And of course, Andre is like, what? Like, who doesn't take more money? Like, that's crazy. And so he gives her another offer, which is still more than what the land is worth, but she said it's more reasonable, so she'll accept it. Um, and then, so of course, like I said, so of course we know that that's Raymond, you know. So later on that night, she sleep, and guess who is sitting in the rocking chair in her room watching her sleep? Galen. Why? Because he knows how to get in and out of her house through all of the secret passageways. And so he is there watching her sleep, and he's debating about waking her up, how he wants to wake her up, but he knows he shouldn't. He knows he shouldn't even be there, much less waking her up, and how that's just not the appropriate thing to do. And so he ends up making himself leave, but not before he leaves a rose on her pillow with his symbol on it. Now his symbol is the dragon, and she saw the symbol on yes, after he bought the land, Andre gave her a letter saying thank you for the land, love Galen. So she saw the dragon symbol, and she knows that he's the one that bought her land. But she's hesitant about the money part of it, because she also knows that he's there to figure out who the trader is. And so she's like, well, I don't know if he's here legitimate, like I don't know if that money is legitimate, or if it's all part of the ruse that he's posing as this rich businessman. So she's a little nervous about spending the money. And so a couple of days later, Andre comes back and he says, listen, my employer wants to know why you're not spending none of this money that you know you need. And she was like, well, first of all, tell your employer that he don't need to be. Oh, she realized the roses from him. Like, I'm going to tell your employer to stay about my business. Okay? So then he was like, well, he sent a gift. Would you accept it? And she was like, well, what is it first? And he was like, listen, please don't make me go back and tell him that you rejected his gift. He already wasn't happy that you didn't take all of the money that I offered you for your land to begin with. Please don't do that. Don't do me like that, ma'am. Don't do me. And so she was like, fine, bring it in. What is it? And it ended up being crates and crates and crates and crates of food and spices and canned vegetables and preservatives and, oranges. And she said she'd only had an orange once in her life. And so she was like, well, and of course by the time she got done, she said, this is ridiculous. Tell him don't do this again. Okay? Because half this food I'm going to have to give away to the church. What am I doing with all this food? I mean, he bought her hams and all kinds of stuff. And so now that the slave catchers are gone, at least they don't see them anymore. And so they've started moving and it's springtime, so they've started moving passengers again. So she said, hey, my passengers are eating good. Okay, they're eating real good right now because I got all this food. Now, the other thing she noticed after she kind of did her inventory or went through all that was there was a chest there. Really beautiful chest. She said she could tell it was sort of antique, a little bit older. She opened up the chest and it was full of nightgowns. All kinds of nightgowns. Everything from practical to naughty. Okay? Okay. Now, I believe hold on. I want to say that's the end of chapter 8. Yeah, that's the end of chapter 8. See, I'll be on top of things. Okay. So, chapter 9. Chapter 9, Hester gets, she ends up going to she's moving some, passengers to the next stop, which ends up being her friend Gail. Gail is a little bit older than her, but Gail, was a friend of her aunt's, and they became really good friends. And she's talking to Hester. She said, are there any houses for sale in, Whitaker? Because I'm thinking about moving. This house just has too many bad memories. She said, did your aunt ever tell you the story of my husband? Because Gail has a son, and Hester was like, well, I never knew the story of her husband. I just knew it was some scandal involved. And so she says, well, let me tell you what it is. Now, another thing that comes up in this story that Beverly Jenkins has written books about later on is the Grayson compound. But again, you have to go back into Beverly Jenkins' world. I don't remember the names of all of these books. But if you read one Beverly Jenkins book and you enjoy it, all I say is just go online and order them all, child. Just order them all. As you know. And so Hester says, well, you can come and stay with me temporarily until you find a place. That's fine if you just need to get away. Well, come to find out what the scandal was is that Gail is connected to the Grayson, like the Grayson estates or Grayson compound. It's her family, and their land was a part of their heritage. her husband married her just to get a hold of her land. Her husband was no good. He was a bigamist. He would marry women, take whatever they had. Women that had land or owned businesses or had a little bit of money. He would milk them dry, and then he would move on to the next victim. Gail's brother never trusted him, so Gail's brother had his eye on him and had him investigated. Found out he had a whole nother wife and that he wasn't no good. And when he realized the jig was up, he went to go leave. And when he went to go leave, she sort of stood up to him, and he ended up beating her. And he beat her to the point where she ended up falling down the steps, and she now has to walk with a cane, permanently walk with a cane. So then she gets a letter from her fiance from Forrester saying, because the mail moved. We think the mail moves slow now, baby. The mail moves so slow that she was getting this letter 3 months later, but the letter was telling her he was gonna be there basically the next day. So she had to drive to go pick him up. The roads were really muddy. It was a long drive to get there. Her mule was acting funky, but when she got there, she saw him. They were happy to see each other. They greeted each other warmly. And he says, I have something to tell you. Baby, her man done went over there and fell in love with another woman. And not somebody at the college at Oxford, because that's where he was. He done fell in love on a trip back. So you was good until you were taking the trip back home, right? And so, of course, Hester was embarrassed, and she was a little hurt. But, of course, her thing was it wasn't a love match. But, damn, you could have let her sister know. You could have something. Send word some kind of way. So so she meets the woman, and the woman seems nice enough. Of course, she was nervous about meeting Hester because she was like, I kind of, stole your man. And her name is Jenny. So they're on their way. Back home, and the mule won't move. The mule just says, I'm done. It's a wrap. Finite. Okay? I'm not moving no more. And she said no matter nothing she tried, she couldn't get him to move. She couldn't get the mule to go. So Forster agrees. He said, we passed the farmhouse down the road. I'm going to go see if I can maybe see if they have a horse we can borrow or rent or whatever. So a little while later, he comes back with this huge carriage is coming down the road, and Hester recognizes the carriage as the same carriage that came that night to come get Galen when Raymond Levesque came to get him. And it is Raymond Levesque driving the carriage, and yes, it is Galen. And somebody put in my comments that they believe that Galen was Creole, but we found out that he absolutely is from Louisiana and he is Creole. And they agreed to rescue, them. So, of course, when Raymond sees her, he hits her with the, don't say nothing, remember, don't say anything. And so she had to pretend like she don't know these people. And they're on the ride back. And Jenny makes some comments that are a little insensitive in reference to colorism, which is a huge topic that we talk about all the time on the regular YouTube channel, on my regular channel all the time. But, so they get back, they drop them off, and later on that night, and of course the attraction is there. They're both feeling the heat from each other, and things like that. And later on that night, Galen comes to check on Hester. He said, are you okay? And she said, I'm a little embarrassed, I'm a little hurt, but it wasn't a love match, so I'm gonna be all right. And he was like, I can't believe he did that to you. I would never do something like that to you. He said, matter of fact, I wasn't going to let you marry him anyway. If I had to scandalize you in the middle of the town so that we would only be able to marry, that's what I would have done, because he didn't deserve you. And she was just like, okay, all right. And then he ends up, before they got out of the carriage, he invited the three of them to his house for dinner. So that is when chapter 9 ends. Let me make sure that I have said all that I want to say. Which I believe I have. I believe I've said all that I want to say. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, join us 5 o'clock, about 15 minutes from now. I'll see y'all there. Peace.